I think it's fantastic that we have new Star Wars to break down and speculate over. I really enjoyed the Ahsoka premiere, and over the last few days, I've been making videos breaking down various scenes, and today, we're going to be focusing on a couple of them, and I want to start with the most controversial. You already know what it is from the thumbnail. Sabine surviving a lightsaber stab, something we've seen Disney do with Reva, the Grand Inquisitor, and just as with those, fans are comparing it to the Phantom Menace when Qui-Gon died from being stabbed in the abdomen by Darth Maul. How did Qui-Gon die, whereas Sabine and all these other characters lived? Well, there are both in-universe and out-of-universe reasons that we're going to explore. Star Wars fans have been debating it, and as always, we can't seem to agree on everything, which is fine, but I want to break down both sides of this. So let's dive into it. A common defense you'll hear is to do with where they were stabbed. Sabine saw Shin Hati's lightsaber go under the right side of her ribcage, so probably slicing through her liver, whereas Qui-Gon Jinn saw Darth Maul's lightsaber go right through his torso and then through his spine. That seems to be a defense I've seen. But I just wish Dave Filoni would have avoided this. They didn't need to do this whole stabbing thing once again. I saw it coming. The episode was littered with Phantom Menace references, Shin and the Maul reference. Even at the start of the episode, Baylan and Shin's entrance was an inverse of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and Sabine getting stabbed by Shin was just another reference to the 1999 prequel trilogy starter The Phantom Menace. Many fans have been expressing their disappointment, and I think when it comes down to it, it's this. It's got nothing to do with medical things, it's simply the fact that Dave Filoni needs Sabine to live, whereas George Lucas needed Qui-Gon to die, because in the context of the story, he already accepted his fate. The scene is literally titled Duel of the Fates. When Qui-Gon was meditating, connecting himself to the Force before the laser gates reopened, he knew he was gonna die. It served George Lucas's story that Qui-Gon died, because if he lived, Anakin would never have turned to the dark side. Qui-Gon was his best path for staying on track to be a Jedi, but Qui-Gon dying means Obi-Wan trains the boy, and the rest is history. With Sabine, I hate to say it, but they wanted their cake and eat it too, but they wanted her to survive. Now in-universe, regardless of where she was stabbed, because a lot of fans seem to disagree on this, if you want an explanation that serves the story, the Ahsoka series takes place about a decade after the original trilogy, and The Phantom Menace was 32 BBY, 3 decades before the original trilogy. So you might argue from a certain point of view, the medical technology was more advanced at this stage that would allow lightsaber wounds to be more easily treated, especially since the Empire is defeated by the time Ahsoka takes place, and the New Republic is now in charge, and they were obsessed with medical technology. It's worth noting Sabine was taken immediately to a medical facility. But justifications aside, what has the impact been on the fandom? How do fans feel? An argument that's come out of this is that lightsaber stabs suddenly don't have the same weight they once did. You don't have the feeling it's a lethal weapon anymore. You get the feeling that most people survive it. But with Sabine, I'm fine with her surviving. But they could have gone with something different, maybe if she lost a hand, or suffered a different kind of wound. Retreading the old episode 1 trope that we've now seen several times in Disney Plus shows just feels kind of tired. But it was a fun lightsaber duel. We've also got to remember, the context of Qui-Gon Jinn's death is more significant than we give it credit for. He'd been learning how to become a Force ghost at the point of death for a number of years. Before the Kenobi show altered canon, we assumed he only learned how to manifest as a voice, but he fully learned Force spirit from the Shaman of the Wills, and so by the time he died, he was ready. So I suppose on a surface level you can look at both of these and say, well, they were both stabbed in very similar ways, but they're not the same. They have very different contexts, and Dave Filoni was just using a visual reference. It could have cauterized quickly, and it didn't grill her to the point of being fatal. And keep in mind in the story, I don't think Shin intended to kill Sabine. Star Wars has always relied on coincidences, relied on luck, and convenience for our main characters. So before we move on to our next Ahsoka topic, let me know in the comments down below. Are you fine with Sabine surviving? Did you like the way they did this? Would you have preferred if she got a different injury, maybe losing a hand? Or do you think it works? And so now, my dear friends, staying on the subject of Ahsoka, Dave Filoni has just settled a massive debate. For the years that Star Wars Rebels was on, for the 4 seasons, fans questioned the nature of Ezra Bridger and Sabine Wren's developing relationship. I'm not a fan of shipping culture, but a lot of fans said Ezra and Sabine will eventually get together. And even in Ahsoka episodes 1 and 2, with Ezra gone, Sabine's been obsessed with him, rewatching the hologram that he left her. She's got his lightsaber that she's been using. Are Ezra and Sabine in love? Are they going to get together when Ahsoka and Sabine go and find him? Presuming he's in Peridea, presuming he's the same person. Well, the answer is a big fat no, and this is not the first time Dave said this, but they see each other as siblings, nothing more. There is not a romance between them. They've developed a bond that is much like siblings, and this was confirmed when Ezra in the hologram says, "You're like a sister to me." I think that was a subtle but very, very clear-cut way of saying these two are not boyfriend and girlfriend, they're not romantically involved, and it's very possible for Sabine and Ezra to love each other, but as friends, very close friends, almost like a brother and sister. So that is something Dave Filoni has clarified once and for all. And so finally, in other Ahsoka news, Star Wars has officially omitted Ahsoka's Book of Boba Fett appearance from the new rewatch list. They have a list of things you should watch before watching the Ahsoka show, the 10 essential Ahsoka Tano episodes. And it's interesting because they include The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 5, Chapter 13 The Jedi, they include Essential Rebels, Tales of the Jedi and Clone Wars episodes, but nothing to do with Book of Boba Fett. Now I understand they had to be concise, but this is both logical news, but somewhat bad news, because could this be a sign that we're not going to see Luke in this series at all? And when she talked about Anakin to him, we know Anakin's going to be in this show, and she said to Luke, "You're so much like your father." Star Wars fans wanted more of that interaction, more Luke, more R2-D2 involved in Ahsoka's life at this time. But the fact they omitted her one appearance in the Book of Boba Fett episode 6 tells me that we're probably not going to see any connections to that in the Ahsoka series. I could be reading into it too much, but it is a shame, because I think From the Desert Comes a Stranger, which some say was peak Star Wars, is my favourite live-action Star Wars TV episode to date. Even though the Book of Boba Fett is not my favourite Star Wars TV show, I've got to give it to Andor or The Mandalorian. This episode alone, as far as TV shows go, tops everything. In that episode, before Grogu decided to return to his dad Din, the two parted with Ahsoka responding perhaps after Luke questioned if he'd ever see her again, seemingly teasing a bigger reunion while also suggesting this was not the first time they'd met. Perhaps the most obvious place would come in Dave Filoni's upcoming theatrical release, and that would be a huge place for him, because I can't imagine a Thrawn-based movie and Heir to the Empire style movie that doesn't include Luke Skywalker in some capacity. But it would be nice if Luke does make an appearance, and this could just be meaningless. But it is a shame it wasn't included in the top 10, but I understand there are bigger appearances of Ahsoka when she was younger, in the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. And of course The Mandalorian Chapter 13 is absolutely vital for understanding Ahsoka's first few episodes, particularly concerning Morgan Elsbeth. And do you remember the first time Ahsoka said Thrawn? As a fandom we collectively lost our minds. But that is all, my dear friends. I just wanted to cover a couple of topics in this video. Let me know your thoughts of everything we spoke about in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and if you want more videos that you can't find here on YouTube while also getting access to our Discord server, then click the link down there in the description. But until the next one, my dear Megalorians, may the Force be with you, always.